Are these the last days of the United States? A very provocative title, and I wanted to take a look at this. Let's check this guy out.
One of the questions I get most often is America even going to be around in the next 100 years? This is a question that's given me a lot of pause because my instinct is to say, in 100 years, what about 20 years? What about 10 years? Will America still be here? Will America be the same? And I think that America doesn't really exist anymore. Not as a nation. As a consumer base and as a market, I believe that America is still here and will be here for a while. But America as a country, I think the age of the nation of America has ended, and the people are no longer really Americans. We're just adversarial consumers. We've entered an age of the adversary. And I don't think that any nation can truly survive when it considers itself its own adversary, because a nation requires a common union for it to kind of coalesce and become what it is. And I think that we had that at one point, but I think it's quite obvious that that's gone now. We call this the United States of America, but I feel like it's never been more disunited than it is now. It's never been so stretched thin as it is now, whether you're talking about ideologically or you're just talking about our power. There's always a lot of comparisons of America being the new Roman Empire and how we are in the fall. And while this isn't a comparison that I usually like to give much credit to because time, technology, and sentiment are so very different, there is a great feeling, there's an acceptance throughout the populace of this nation that we are in decline and that things are coming to an end. The question is, do these fears and speculations manifest themselves into reality? Do things begin to fall apart? I honestly don't believe that America continues to exist the way that it is now. Not if we're going the way that things are now. Even if you look at simple calls for secession in individual states, states like Washington, states like Virginia, where all the voting power, all the decision making is controlled by one small geographic area.
I didn't know Washington was considering secession. I didn't know that. And I lived in Virginia. I didn't see a whole lot of that. Although, I got to tell you, living in one of the 13 original colonies, it's sad to see how far they have strayed from the precepts of the founding of the nation, the precepts of the framers of the Constitution. That's why it's fun to live in an actual free country called you, uh, the Commonwealth of Texas. Anyway,
And the decisions that they make aren't reflected in the ideologies or belief systems of those from kind of the greater, larger geographic area of those states. Because as things are becoming more divisive, as things are becoming more adversarial, the beliefs and the perceived realities that the people hold on to are grown so far apart now. Like I said, we have entered a kind of adversarial era. The momentum of inter-citizen conflict has really picked up into a very unpredictable and dangerous place for it to be. And honestly, there's no signs of pulling back, not when Americans see themselves pitted against one another. One of the things we do on this channel is we kind of look back into what things used to be and how they are now, and seeing and drawing from that comparison what we think might happen and how it's reflecting on the situation that we find ourselves in now. And I have a very hard time drawing any kind of comparison because I don't think that a nation at this scale has ever existed where the people hold such animus and paranoia for one another. It's grown to the degree that people don't even trust their neighbors. People close themselves off and speculate the intentions and reasonings of people that they don't even know, people who aren't in their lives, people who have no effect on them, and they hold those people harshly by those perceived intentions. Even though the fact is, most people just want to live a simple life, and that's what it is. You know, without the baggage of modernity and the politics in America, people just want to live normal, free lives.
I can agree with him on the disunity or the disjointedness that we have. I think what we have in common is really our strength, not necessarily diversity. It used to be that nations would have an identity. I don't think we necessarily have that. I mean, we got American culture somewhat with we're the big purveyors of burgers and fries and steaks and cowboy hats and so forth. But it's not universal. Like if there's a certain culture to being so-called Irish, but they're getting rid of that in Europe with all of their um, mass migration, like we're doing so here, diluting what it means to be American. And so I see where he's going with this, and I lament it somewhat myself. This multiculturalism is not necessarily where it's at. And I know there are some people who are more melanated like me, like, Tor, what are you talking about? What about black culture? Well, black culture is American culture. It's part of that. We've been here since the founding. There are some things that are coming now that are not necessarily that have been around since the founding that can add flavor, add some spice to what we are trying to accomplish here. But the main thing is freedom. That those 10 the Bill of Rights, and it's become a bastardization of what was intended. And in some cases, I think the main thing is we have so many people who are just so pro-government, they don't recognize what freedom is. I remember working with a guy, and I knew he was talking about Donald Trump when he said, do you think people should be able to lie, especially when he was talking politicians? And I said, yeah. As long as the opposition gets to tell their side of the story too. But I took it further. I said, who do you think should be the one to determine what the truth is? And he said, the government. And we were government contractors. And he said this: if you trust the government, then your history teacher didn't do their job. All you gotta do is read a little bit of history, or read the Declaration of Independence, start reading the Constitution. You'll recognize it is really American to be to keep government at bay. This is what you can't do, and those things. This is what you can do, and if we didn't say you can do this, then those rights are reserved for the people and for the states. Stay within your bounds. But all the stuff that we're trying now has already been tried, which is why they left and formed the New World. But let's let the man continue.
It's very simple, and this is something that has been throughout history. People just want to live unobstructed lives where they're not starving and they don't have to worry about constant warfare. And while in America, warfare isn't something that we've experienced in a long time, it's something that people are beginning to yearn for. It may sound silly, and if you're not too aware of history, it's even going to sound even stranger, but bars and taverns are where history's decisions are made. It's not in the halls of Parliament, it's not made in the Capitol building, it's in bars and taverns and pubs. And as someone who likes to observe people and really has an interest in what people have to say, it's a good place to be to really kind of put your finger on the pulse of the civil discussion. And as I've said before, I'm not someone who particularly likes to drink. I did a lot of that when I was in the military. And as a family man, it's not something that's appropriate for me to do. But this past weekend, we did go out and had a couple of drinks. And while taking a moment to go outside in the back, there's a large smoking area. There was about 20 or 30 people in their early 20s out there. And this was an interesting situation because there's a lot of protests going on. And this is one of the protesting crowds who got done for the day and decided to go have a drink. And high on the endorphins and adrenaline of the day, they were all back there and they had a lot of things to say. And the topic of discussion wasn't one of unity. It wasn't one of coming together. The topic of discussion out there was one of violence, was one of revenge, was one of paranoia. One person in particular, very energetic, got up and was talking about how the problem with America is now that we don't have enough lynchings, that we let people get away with too much. People from the highest halls of power, people from the lowest, that the world would be much better if we just went back in time and started getting rid of entire segments of the population. And more so, why not do that now?
Well, I don't know about lynchings, but I guess I can relate to that when it comes to the electric chair. All this, if you're going to have the death penalty, I like back in the days of the Green Mile, like in that movie. We think it's humane to paralyze somebody, but keep them conscious while we put them to death. Anyway, I hope he's not right about bars and taverns, because, like he said, I'm not a drinker, so I don't go to a lot of bars unless I'm there and they're serving food, like a Chili's or someplace like that. I guess that's a bar. TGI Fridays is technically also a bar, but it's a restaurant, so I go for the restaurant side. I think today's bars and taverns are social media, where you can create a group, create a meeting, people actually meet in person, and then they make some decisions. I think that's how the whole Tea Party movement got going, and now the genesis of MAGA and the continuation of it. Anyway, let's continue.
Someone who's pretty familiar with violence, and it's not something that I think anyone really wants. And I've always found it interesting that those who know nothing of violence are always the ones who are calling for it, because this wasn't exactly a crowd of intimidating people. You know, these were young people who probably never spent a day in the gym, have definitely had no kind of training at all, but their enthusiasm and want for chaos and violence was jarring. But I know that it's not typical. It's something that's becoming more common. It's a more commonly accepted belief now that we're entering an era, the era of the American adversary, where violence isn't seen as a last resort, but a required mechanism to move forward. And the problem is there's no logical, rational voice speaking against that sentiment that's spreading across the country right now. If violence is the mood of the day and it's being pushed and pressed upon the people in its justification, then it's just an inevitability, really. America has become a powder keg, and it's not going to take much to set it off. So what are the chances that we're going to be here in 100 years? It's unlikely, not in the form it is right now. If you were to tell me that America were to break down into more regional nations, this is something that I would agree with more. A government structure that wouldn't result in the oppression of the vast majority of the country, because America right now is being led by radicals from either side. The problem with that is that radicals are usually a subpopulation. It doesn't take very many, but their voice is often the loudest, and it's mistaken for being a much larger population than it actually is. But the thing is, like I said, people just want peace. And if that peace is attained by simply agreeing with and standing by and accepting that if I give these people their way, maybe they'll just leave me alone. I feel like throughout history, this is very misguided. Radicalism always needs to be confronted where it is, and it should never be given the reins of governance. Because no matter how reasonable you think a radical voice may be, it will always end in a nightmare reality of oppression. So I guess the question that we have to ask each other, is there a road back to civility? Is there a road back to conversation? Is there a liminal spot in the ideological landscape where parties can meet and actually share ideas without sword in hand? It's difficult. It's difficult to say yes or no. But as we stand right now, no, it's not. It's not possible. Both sides have drawn themselves so far away from each other that a conflict is inevitable. It has to happen. Politics was a device created to avoid warfare. But when political parties begin to see each other as enemies, there's no liminal area for them to meet anymore. Your adversaries, that's it. Politics goes out the window because it becomes an area of survival now. In the maintenance and the health of a state can't continue if that same nation is at war with itself. So I think we can look at our politics at a grand scale, and I think we can all agree how insane it has become. My belief is that with the abolition of a political structure, with the abolition of government, the people will still exist, and the people have to find a way. And in a space as large as America, where people believe such radically different things and hate each other, in lieu of a government giving some kind of control in structure that disincentivizes violence, this country would turn on itself in a heartbeat.
Well, I want to edit something I said earlier. I talked about there being a lack of unity, and I do see some of the disjointedness that he's talking about. But I do really think at our heart, about 70% of the nation is on the same page when it comes to the big issues. It's just that, as President Trump has said, the media is the biggest enemy to uh, the people. If they told the truth, we'd be a whole lot better off. But they're not telling the truth. They're the ones that are stirring up ire. Fortunately, some of the big players, or formerly big players, don't have the audience that they used to have because people recognize that they're not telling the truth. I really think about 70% of us are on the same page, which is why the party that's not pro-Trump, Democrat Party, is having the lowest approval ratings that they've ever had. I think their approval rating is like 29%. The disapproval ratings are higher because, for whatever reason, the hill they want to die on is we're going to have men in women's private spaces and their bathrooms and sports. They're not letting that go in spite of how unpopular it is with their constituents and the people who vote against them. They want to stick up for that for some reason. It's not like the abortion issue. Well, even on the abortion issue, I hear that more and more people are recognizing, hey, that is a life. And I think people just want to go to that as a form of birth control. When it comes to marriage, I think most people still, when you hear the word marriage, you're thinking a man and a woman. But it's the other side that wants to push it the extremes. Anyway, so I don't think it's as 50-50 as I used to when I was watching the news and thinking, why our nation can't be 50-50 on certain things. We can't, even on this tariff stuff, we can't be 50-50 in that, the rest of the nation can have tariffs on us. But as soon as we start even introducing some reciprocity, all of a sudden the world's going to come to an end. I don't think we're a 50-50 nation on that. I think folks recognize, hey, what we were doing was not working. We've got to try something else. And these other nations are doing it and it's benefiting them. Let's do it for ourselves. We have done it in the past. We haven't always had an IRS. I think there is some unity there. Doesn't have to be 100%, but it's more than 50.
We're almost there. And it's not something that anybody wants. Well, that's wrong. It's not something that I want, and I feel like it's not something that most of you want. But the calls for violence are there, and they're getting louder. And as political division grows and rages, that call is only going to become even more louder. And as time goes on, it will become more clear, and the sides will become more defined. And that's really where the issue is. What we're already seeing is a self-segregation of America drawn on the lines of ideology. And this is a road that can only lead to disaster, really. And I, for one, am not willing to see where that road goes down. So as always, lead with empathy and try to be the voice of reason and diffuse the kind of situations before they get bad. Because in this era of the American adversary, where patriots have turned on each other, I think it becomes more incumbent on us all to become a voice of reason instead of a nation of sociopaths whose only will is to dump gasoline on that fire. Because in the course and the way that things are now, no. The answer is simple. In 100 years, in 50 years, maybe in 20 years, will America still exist? The answer can only be a resounding no. Not in the America that we have grown to appreciate or that we grew up in. And while many people will cheer on that kind of destruction, the vacuum of power that would be left behind in the fall of the United States would throw the world into certain chaos. And that's not something that I would like to witness either. But hey, thank you for stopping by. If you have any agreements, disagreements, put them in the comment sections. Your thoughts, put them down there. Likes and dislikes, we appreciate them all.
I like this guy. I wish I knew him or more people like him in my sphere of influence. He's an obvious thinker, reads a lot. I can tell that he's a reader and a thinker and cares about the nation. Only God knows what the future holds for the United States, but I do agree that if the United States is gone, what's left for the rest of the world? I mean, we already see in nations like the UK, if you say the wrong things on social media, you can get arrested. That is bonkers. Who's going to stand up for that? I believe it looks like because of some trade policy that President Trump is initiating, in order for there to be some fair trade, part of the negotiation is you guys got to change your policy when it comes to free speech. He's doing the same thing when it comes to the tech bros and their social media platforms. You want to continue to exist and have the freedoms that you have and the tax benefits, you got to stop with all the censorship. It's not going away totally for some of those guys. Their terms of service give them a whole lot of leeway. But there are some that I've discovered as a result of the censorship game that they were playing. There were platforms I didn't know about that I know about today, and I'm glad they exist as alternatives. But this guy's a good thinker. I don't think we're in the last days just yet, but what do I know? I do think if America goes, that is the beginning. I mean, I've heard people say the United States is not in the Bible. The only nation that we really talk about that's guaranteed some survival is Israel. I don't read about the United States in the Bible, but in terms of the nation that is closest to the precepts that we read in the Bible, this is it. We're the reason why we're a exceptional nation is because we're the first nation in the history of the world never to have a king, queen, or czar. We're the first nation in the history of the world to say that the people are above the members of government and not the other way around. And we're the first nation in the history of the world to declare itself a nation under God. That's what makes us exceptional. No other nation has done that since. If they do so, it's only in writing. It's not in practice. And this is something that we try to practice. But I like what he had to say. And I'll look for more of what he has to say going forward. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.